Welcome to Proven and Probable. I'm Maurice Jackson, and I'm delighted to have you here today. Before we begin today's video, make sure you give us a thumbs up and leave a comment in the comment section below. And as always, we thank you for your continued support. And just a reminder, we sell physical precious metals through Miles Franklin Precious Metals Investments. We offer physical delivery to your home, precious metal IRAs, and Brinks depository accounts. You can reach me at 855-505-1900. That's 855-505-1900. Or you may email Maurice@milesfranklin.com. That's Maurice@milesfranklin.com. Now, before we begin, I want to introduce you to what is arguably the best book on investing and finance, entitled Nobody Knows Anything, written by Bob Morairty, the founder of 321 Gold and 321energy.com. You can pick up a copy on our website under the Education tab. And again, the book is entitled Nobody Knows Anything. Joining us for a conversation is the founder of 321 Gold and 321energy.com. He is the legendary Bob Morairty. Today we're going to be discussing geopolitics, immigration, and gold. Mr. Moriarty, welcome to the show, sir.
Well, it's a real pleasure to talk to you, and especially things that are going on in the Middle East right now. The geopolitics are very, very important. There's some horrible things happening in Syria, and the world needs to know about them.
Well, it's unfortunate, but that's why we're glad you're here on the program to give us your insights. So speaking of Syria, let's begin there right now, where the U.S. is currently conducting large-scale bombing operations throughout the region as we speak. Sir, who is the U.S. bombing? Why are they focused on Syria and actually Yemen as well? And what is the end game?
Wow, that's like 6 questions. Let's talk about Yemen, because the answer to that is simple. The Houthis, have support Hamas, support Palestine. They're against the Israeli Zionist invasion of Gaza, and they have said, if you don't stop the genocide, we're going to keep sinking ships. That is strictly a political issue between Israel and the Houthis. When you get into Syria, it's a much more confusing issue. And let me tell you something I don't think even you're aware. Did you know that my nephew, my only nephew, was in the Army Special Forces, and he was killed on November 4th, 2016. He was in Jordan training the terrorists to attack Syria. Very few Americans are aware of this, but the Americans were supporting, arming, and paying for Al-Qaeda and the terrorists to attack Syria. Deposing Assad has always been a goal of Israel, and they got the United States to pay for it. And my nephew was over there. There was a conflict between the CIA and the terrorists said, look, when the United States goes into battle, you have air power, you have artillery, you have all the support. We want the same thing. And the CIA said, bug off. We're paying you, we're giving you weapons, go out there and die. So the king of Jordan had one of his tribesmen who was in charge of the gate at the Air Force base that the American Special Forces were operating out of. There were 3 vehicles. There was 1 Special Forces guy in the first vehicle, 2 in the second vehicle, and 1 in the third vehicle. They drove up to the gate guard after doing the training for the day, and the sergeant major picked up an M16 and killed the 2 guys in the first truck. and he chased the guys down in the second and third truck. And my nephew was in the second truck. He was armed with a 9mm pistol. And this sergeant major, who was in the King of Jordan's tribe, literally chased him down and shot him at point blank range, hit him 3 times in the chest, and he was dead before he hit the ground. Now, my brother has, I think, 4 or 5 daughters, but he only had 1 son. And it was devastating to the family. And, it's only been in the last 6 months that the United States government has actually admitted we were training the terrorists. Well, one of the terrorists, HTS, okay, I think there was a $10 million bounty on, and between the United States, Israel, and Turkey, they planned an invasion of Syria, and they literally overthrew Syria, and Assad made it out in the nick of time. But today, I don't know whether they're Israeli, I don't know if they're American, I don't know if they're Turkish. There are fighters from one tribe going out chasing down people in another tribe and murdering them in cold blood. And I'm seeing numbers of 10,000, 15,000 being killed literally in the last day or two. And one of the things that I've said for a long time, and I'll ask you the question, you were in the military. Okay, if one country attacks another country, or if one tribe attacks another tribe, what are the 3 things that will happen?
I'm never in my thinking cap as I'm interviewing you. So here we go. The 3 things that happen when one attacks another, I'm going to think here logically. Death.
That's one.
Destruction from infrastructure.
Nah, that's meaningless. Who cares? You're going to always rebuild.
All right. So if you don't have death, then you will have those that are non-combatants that get impacted. So I would say refugees.
That's 2. One more. What about the people who don't get killed? What about the people who don't turn into refugees? The people who are left, what do?
Well,
what would you do if your town was attacked?
Well, I'm going to fight back.
Thank you. That's 3.
Okay, there we go. All right, thank you.
Everybody does one of those 3. They either die, they turn into a refugee, or they fight back. And strange enough, what's happening in Syria, HTS and his group captured one area, Israel captured another area, Turkey captured another area, and these guys are running around. Everybody that's in the wrong tribe, they kill. Here's why it's important, and here's something that nobody ever discusses. What do the refugees go through? Now, again, because you're in the military, somebody in the U.S. military goes into combat. My nephew, for example. What do we call him?
In the U.S., we're going to call him a hero.
Okay. And what do we do with him?
After the fighting is over?
After he's been killed.
Oh, we bury him. We forget about him usually.
No, we bury him. What do we give the family?
You may give them a flag and their life insurance.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Life insurance flag.
We give them life insurance. We give them a flag. We put them in a nice tin coffin. We ship them back to the United States. We dig a hole and dump them in the ground. When somebody gets killed who is a civilian, what do we call them?
Casualty of war.
No.
All right. What do we call them?
Collateral damage.
Collateral damage. Okay.
Okay. Who buries them?
It's usually just the if they're able to be buried, depending on how bad the cause of death was. Sometimes they don't get buried, or they're just their immediate family does it.
Strange enough, you just covered one of 2 things happened. The family buries them, okay, because the family cares about them. And if the entire family's been killed, the crows eat them.
Yeah.
Who gets the flag?
No one gets the flag.
Nobody. Nobody gets the flag. So, if a 20-year-old Army corporal gets killed, he's a hero. If a 20-year-old Afghan civilian gets killed, he's a collateral damage. Okay, we just don't care. And there are tens of thousands of people who are at risk in Afghanistan right now. Now, will you agree that there is an immigration problem in Europe and in the United States?
Absolutely.
Okay. There were 40 million people in Ukraine prior to the invasion in February 2022. 7 million of them went to Europe as refugees.
Yeah.
And they said, okay, Germany, Poland, Sweden, Finland, we want you to take care of us. So they put an incredible burden on the EU, okay? But the EU and the United States were the people who started the goddamn war in the first place.
Imagine that.
Now, what's even better, our beloved president who believes in peace, there are 245,000 Ukrainian immigrants in the United States who are refugees from the war. What did he just do to them in the last week?
Well, I don't want to sound harsh. He just basically gave them a death sentence?
Well, sort of. Okay. He canceled their visa. He said, get out. We don't want you anymore. So the United States that started this war in the first place in 2014, thanks to Victoria Nuland, $5 billion, okay, just literally have put 245,000 Ukrainians' lives in danger by saying, we don't want you in the United States anymore. And the reason I'm saying this is somebody came to me about 3 months ago and said, look, I was at a conference and I met this young couple, and they're educated, they speak excellent English, they're both college grads, they're nice people, and they're refugees from Afghanistan. Will you help them for the next 3 months? And I said, sure. So I sat down and I talked to them, and I was trying to figure out what they could do. They applied for residency in Portugal, and it takes a long time to go through the whole approval process. And the woman who told me, who came to me and wanted me to help them, had told me the story about what the wife had gone through. When she was 6 years old, the Taliban came into her village, took all the men out, and shot them in the head. She saw her father killed when she was 6. They killed every male in the village. And she had a couple of brothers, and she was hoping they didn't get killed. And she tells the story in the book. They literally disguised the boys as girls, okay, so the Taliban wouldn't kill them before they went on to the next village. But when I heard that story, literally, you would have to be tough. I cried, okay? It was absolutely heartbreaking. And I realized this is something that is going on literally every day of the week. And nobody's talking about it. Nobody's aware of it. So I talked to this couple and said, look, I'm going to help you write a book. And I actually played a very small part in it. I got an editor entitled it, and I sent him all the information they had written down, and we put together a book in 5 weeks. And the title of the book is Our Journey from Afghanistan. And you should put a link into it. But here's the key. You know how anti-war I am, and that's because I was in a war and I saw how useless it was. All this bullshit about waving flags and rah, rah, rah war, it's all bullshit. When you get into combat, you realize, hey, this is not nearly as much fun as we were told it was going to be. When people are trying to kill you and you're trying to kill people, you're sitting there thinking, well, I'll tell you a funny story. Okay, I go over there as an F4 pilot. I started my flight training in May of 1965. I got my wings in December of 1966. I went to Vietnam as an F-4 pilot in July of 1968. And what they would do, because the climate was so harsh, they would literally have you fly these really meaningless missions, night missions, night TPQ missions. You're radar guided, you're at 20,000 feet, you're over layouts. They tell you when to drop your bombs. You never see enemy, you never see gunfire, you never see anything. And it's just to show you that, okay, this is what it's like to fly in combat. So the very first flight that I actually made, I know I'm going on a night TPQ mission. I'm a single aircraft. I've got a guy in the back seat, a radar intercept operator. We take off from Da Nang. It's about a 12,000-foot runway. Lift off, gear up, flaps up, start accelerating. And I see these red things going pew, 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 pew. And I asked the guy in the back, "What's that?" He said, "Oh, we're getting shot at."
Yeah.
There's a guy with a 50 caliber machine gun, and he aims the thing straight up, okay? And he can't see us, but he knows we're there, okay? And he's hoping to shoot us down. Now, what makes... Oh, what are you doing, silly dog?
Hey, the story's getting too good.
Yeah.
You have me on the edge of my seat right now, actually.
He's scared. Strange enough, he's hiding underneath my desk. "Oh, Dad, come on, I'm scared. Are you going to be okay?" So I'm getting shot at. And this is something every single person that goes, who is actually a combatant, okay, not a guy who shows up in a war zone, but a guy who actually is trying to kill people trying to kill him. The same thing goes through their head. Okay, I'm flying this airplane, having a good time, gear up, flaps up, bing, 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 red tracers passing by, and I'm thinking, somebody's trying to kill me. What I do to them? Why is he trying to kill me? And of course, I'm loaded with 10 500-pound bombs that I'm going to go drop on his grandfather, okay? And what goes through your head is, God, this guy's trying to kill me. Why is he trying to kill me? Well, he's trying to kill you because you're an idiot. You're over there fighting a war. Should have never been fighting in the first place. Everybody who's ever been in combat and been shot at goes through exactly the same thing. And you're sitting there saying, why is this guy shooting at me? Well, it's because you're behind a 50 caliber machine gun. You're shooting at him. Fair is fair.
Interesting. And you referenced Laos. I shared with you prior to this call that my wife actually is a refugee, her whole family, of course, from Laos. And she shared a very similar story that you shared, where she was on a bus and they took all the males out, or all the people on the bus, and very similar. All the males were killed, and they put the women back on the bus and the kids and sent them on their way. And they basically couldn't even react, as you naturally would. You'd cry and be horrified. It was just a terrifying experience, and I hope she doesn't mind me sharing that, but I think it's important for us to know that, because those are some stories that you just don't hear about. They didn't make the news at that time, but today you're sharing right now these same atrocities occur, and they don't make the news necessarily. And of course, being in the West, for the most part, we're going to see it on our television screen, we're going to see it on our smartphone, but then we're going to go about our daily lives. We really can't appreciate, for lack of better words, or understand what someone's going through, and we just say, well, that's their problem. Well, that's the obvious, but the not so obvious is what you're addressing is there are going to be people fleeing, and there's going to be consequences, and they're going to try to find new homes. So let's kind of delve into that if we can. You referenced the title of the book is Our Journey from Afghanistan. They were written by a couple. What's the couple's names?
Because there is still family in Afghanistan, they're using nom de plume.
All right.
Pseudonyms, okay, but Czar and Kasim. And one of the issues I had when we were doing this book is I wanted a really simple title for people to remember. And our journey from Afghanistan is the story of everything they went through. And of course, you've got this young woman who her story starts when she was 6, who ends up going to college in Kabul, and she eventually meets the Qasim, who is now her husband, who is a computer student in Kabul. Everything about their life was difficult. I mean, they were close to starvation so many times. People were being murdered. The village was being bombed. And all of this goes back to 1979. The Russians had put a puppet government in charge of Afghanistan, and everything was kind of okay. And under Jimmy Carter, Zbigniew Brzezinski went to Jimmy Carter and said, look, if we arm the rebels, okay, we've got an opportunity to destroy the USSR. And everybody's forgotten this, but this is what actually started the war. And so they armed the rebels. The rebels started attacking the government. The Russians invaded, and the war went on for 10 years, and it literally bankrupted the USSR. And the Russians got run out of Afghanistan with their tail between their legs. But it killed 1 million Afghan refugees, okay? And then the Taliban took over, and then the Americans after 9/11 sponsored the rebels against the Taliban, kicked the Taliban out for 10 years, and then the Taliban came back in 1921. This has been going on for 46 years, okay? And there have been people on both sides, okay, who have been turned into refugees, who have gone through horrible, horrible things. The same thing is happening today in Syria. And there are Christians, and there are Alawites, and there are Druze, and there are Jews, and there are Turks who are being massacred because they're part of the wrong tribe. And we keep starting these wars, and we act like there's no cost to it. But every empire in history has collapsed when they started getting involved in military adventures that they didn't have to get involved in that bankrupted the country. Mm-hmm. And we know it happened to Spain, okay, even though Spain had unlimited wealth from 1492 until about 1810. We know it happened to France, okay? The Revolution of France started in 1789, but it goes directly back to the French involvement in the American Revolutionary War, and everybody has forgotten this. The rebels, the American colony people would have lost the war were it not for the support of France, but it bankrupted France. So when the women in Paris couldn't buy wheat because of the cost in 1789, because everybody was bankrupt, they started a revolution. They killed 35,000 people. They took them to the guillotine. Mm-hmm. They stole all of the property from the elite, okay, which at that time were the royals and the priests and the nuns. And they went through horrible times. Well, if France had not gotten involved in the Revolutionary War, there wouldn't have been a revolution in France. So England bankrupted itself, the Soviet Union bankrupted itself, Spain bankrupted itself, the Dutch bankrupted themselves. And the same thing is true of the United States today. And I know that Trump and Elon Musk think that they could save the United States and they can reduce spending. If they reduce spending to $1 trillion a year, it just means it takes a little bit longer to go bankrupt. The price of gold is telling us the system is coming unglued. So I'll go back to the book, and I highly recommend, if you care about your country, if you care about the world, show it in a very real way, read the book and understand what people have gone through. And all we would have to do is say, we're going to stop fighting these stupid wars. There's no purpose to it. The United States has fought more wars in the last 100 years than any country in history. It is the most warlike country in world history, and we lost every single war. We didn't win World War II, the Russians did, okay? They killed 90% of the Germans who died in World War II. We act like we won at Normandy. Bullshit, okay? Normandy was a minor thing compared to what the Russians were going through on the Eastern Front. Mm-hmm. But I am anti-war, one, because I don't like killing people, two, because I don't like people trying to kill me, and three, what it does to both your economy and to the innocent people. I love children, okay? The idea of a 6-year-old little girl having to watch her father being killed, that's horrible.
That's
okay? And it needs to stop. And it's only going to stop if we will educate ourselves and understand what happens, okay? The United States wasn't totally responsible for the war in Syria, but Syria has been turned into a failed state, just like Lebanon is a failed state, just like Afghanistan's a failed state. For what? Who's better off? Why do we want to do this? Why is the president of France willing to threaten Russia with nuclear weapons to get Ukraine into NATO? NATO died a death. It was past its sell-by date 30 years ago, okay? Why are we still fighting wars that we couldn't possibly win in the first place that serve no purpose whatsoever? And the answer is, well, it's good for the military-industrial complex.
I don't want to digress too much, but I want to get your view on this. Why is it we never see China involved in any of these conflicts in the Middle East? It's always the U.S., as you referenced, but no one seems to ever ask, hey, why is China not involved directly in the bombings and shootings and sending troops as we have over the past, as you referenced, 40 years here, basically? Why don't we see that from China?
For the same reason that now is a really good time to invest in resource stocks.
All right, expand on that for us.
All things change. We know that Donald Trump has threatened Iran. We know that Israel has threatened Iran and has said absolutely unequivocally they intend to attack Iran no later than mid-year. Now, who supports Iran?
China.
And?
Russia.
Thank you. Who's going to win?
I would say, if I was a betting person, and I'm not, I'd go with the three we just referenced.
Thank you. It is that simple.
And that's not unpatriotic. That's just being logical.
Exactly. They got better weapons. Okay. There were 2 attacks by Iran on Israel from a military point of view. They were overwhelmingly successful. Now, you don't read this in the mainstream media in the West because the mainstream media in the West is controlled and they lie about everything. But Iran showed they have the ability to punch right through everything that Israel has got. In the very first attack, Iran actually told Israel and the United States and Jordan and Saudi Arabia and Turkey, here's when we're going to do it. Okay, we're going to send off all the slow stuff first, and then we're going to come up with our missiles at the very end. So we're going to start at 8 o'clock at night, and we're going to go through about midnight.
Sounds like Lyndon Johnson.
No, I'm talking about...
I know you are. I was making... yeah, sounds like Lyndon Johnson during Vietnam, but yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but the funny thing is, they call them the Allied forces if you want. Turkey, Israel, the United States, Jordan, Saudi Arabia. They all knew exactly what was going to happen. All those ships out in the Gulf of Hormuz knew exactly what was going to happen. They had the ability to use every single weapon at the disposal of Israel, Turkey, United States, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and all those ships. Mm-hmm. And Iran still got through, and they still hit the 3 targets they were aiming at, And the scary thing to me as an ex-military guy is they weren't using their most effective weapons. They were using the old, out-of-date weapons. So this concept that there's this shield around Israel is bullshit.
Yeah, that's the
Doesn't
narrative.
exist.
That's the narrative. Absolutely, yes.
Narrative says, well, the narrative in Zelensky today, okay, talking about Russia. Oh, we're winning. Okay, we're not trapped in that salient in Russia. We're just perfectly fine. Well, there's tens of thousands of people. They're killing like 2,500 Ukrainians daily. And he said, no, we're doing just fine. We're not surrounded. We're going to see some really scary things. And unfortunately, Trump has gone from the peace president to the warmonger president. He flip-flops, on odd days he's in favor of peace, and on even days he's saying, let's start World War III.
Well, one way or the other. And that alludes to my next question here. How have foreign interventions influenced the progression and the outcomes of these conflicts? And you kind of touched on it, where Russia and the U.S., supporting the rebels, and it's interesting how the nomenclature changes. If they're on your side, they're rebels. If they're bad guys, they're terrorists.
Yeah, exactly. I'll ask a really loaded question, and you're going to have to think about it, because it's contrary to all the natives that you've heard. What is the correct description of Hamas? What are they as a organization, without any of the adjectives and any of these, oh, they're horrible people? What position does Hamas hold in Gaza?
I don't know the answer, so I'm going to wing it here. A liberation. No,
that's the narrative.
That's the narrative. Okay, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, let me ask the question in a different way. It was going to be a lot easier. Who is the legally, democratically elected government of Gaza?
Was it not Hamas?
Of course it was Hamas. Now, the funny thing is, and the narrative won't tell you this, Israel started Hamas. Israel supported Hamas. Israel knew all about the attack on October 7th, okay? It was no surprise to them. Netanyahu wanted that attack, okay? And he's got it. As long as he could stay prime minister, he could stay out of jail. So we've got literally hundreds of thousands of people dying to keep Benjamin Netanyahu out of jail. And you could call Hamas terrorists, and you could say it was a horrible thing for them to take 1,200 or 250 hostages. But the fact is, if it's horrible for Hamas to take 250 hostages, how horrible is it for Israel to take 7,000 hostages? So the narrative has nothing to do with the facts on the ground, and we're being lied to about everything. Now, I'm not supporting the attack by Hamas, okay, on Israel at all. I regret that it took place. However, they were the democratically elected government of Gaza. And if Israel had left them alone, and if it wasn't running the world's largest open-air prison, Israel would have never been attacked. And Israel knew the attack was coming and had the plans for the attack a year in advance. So, it's nice for Israel to play the victim, but it's also bullshit.
Well, at this minute mark, I'm going to see a lot of... You just ruffled some feathers there, which is, I'm perfectly fine with it. But right here at this minute mark, I know they're going off right now. You're going to have those that are completely opposed to your view. But I enjoy the perspective that you're providing us, because again, it's not the narrative, and we get lost in narratives versus just looking at the facts. The narrative, as you referenced.
Well, let me go one better. Let me make a prediction. Okay. You'll put this up on YouTube, and there will be 50 glowing comments, okay, about the interview. And it takes that long for the people in Israel to say, hey, wait a minute, we've got somebody criticizing Israel. We've got somebody telling the truth. We got to stop that. So that's when they come in, okay. The first 50 comments will be very positive, and then they'll start attacking me, okay. And they will never discuss the narrative being incorrect because the narrative is wrong, and they know the narrative is wrong, and they hate it when people tell the truth. But I'll be candid, okay. Peace in the Middle East would mean peace in the world. And as long as Israel keeps wanting to attack all of their neighbors, there will never be peace. And I wrote a piece here about a week or so ago, and I used Matthew 26, I think it was. Those who live by the sword will die by the sword. The United States and Israel are literally risking their future by continuing to start wars that serve no purpose whatsoever other than to feed the military-industrial complex. The BRICS and China and Brazil and Saudi Arabia and South Africa and Russia have far more effective weapons than the debt-based system. The debt-based system of the West, you and I know this because you and I have been talking about it for years. The debt-based system of the West is collapsing right now. And gold at $3,000 an ounce is the canary in the coal mine. It's the thermometer. It's the patient with 108-degree temperature saying, hey, we got a problem with this patient. He's about to kick the bucket. The debt-based system of the West is collapsing, and it's going to drive the price of silver and gold far higher. And, we're in the middle of it right now. And the question is, are the idiots in the United States who control Donald Trump, are they going to insist on starting World War III? And there's a real good chance they will. Did I ever talk to you about who had more responsibility for starting World War II than anybody else?
I'm going through my memory bank here. No.
I don't think I did.
No.
I read something in the last week or two, and the title of the article was something like, who was responsible for starting World War II? And the guy that wrote the article made a very convincing argument that it was actually Franklin D. Roosevelt, okay? Because we had the market crash in October of 1929. It crashed into 1932, and then it was up 150% in a year, and it crashed again into 1937. And there were actions that Roosevelt was taking in 1937 and 1938, egging on the UK, okay, and Europe to take Germany on. He saw a war as a way of coming out of the Depression. Now, I'm not saying I agree with this 100%, but it was actually a very convincing argument, and I can believe there was some truth to it. Certainly, we knew the Japanese were going to attack at Pearl Harbor. That was not a surprise attack. We knew all about that, and Roosevelt wanted the attack to take place because he didn't have a corpus belli to get into a war with Germany. So if we could get Japan to attack us, then we could declare war on Germany. But Germany didn't attack us, Japan did. So we declared war on Germany, which was the original purpose.
Yeah, I believe it was Billy Mitchell. Was it 9 years prior to the actual invasion of Pearl Harbor? He predicted it would happen on a Sunday, did he not?
Yep.
Yep. So it's not...
There was a Navy lieutenant commander who went to Roosevelt a year before December of 41, and he had 12 recommendations. Said if you can get Japan to do these things, they will attack us. And I think Roosevelt invoked 11 out of the 12, and it was shut off the banking system to Japan and shut off shipment of oil and fuel to Japan, and shut off the shipment of steel to Japan. So we deliberately pressed Japan to attack, and they thought they could end the war. And they actually could have ended the war. And again, I'll go back to the time you were in the military. There were supposed to be two different attacks. The second attack on the 7th of December, they were going to take out the fuel farms in Hawaii. And the Japanese admiral who was in charge of the attack said, no, the first attack was effective enough. We don't have to do that. If the Japanese had taken out the fuel supply in Hawaii, the war would have ended.
Oh, yeah. That would
because
have been...
we had no way of refueling the ships.
Right.
It would have taken 6 months to a year, literally, to get enough fuel to get those carriers out. So interesting things have happened. And of course, World War II killed like 67 million people. I'm just absolutely dead set. I don't see any purpose whatsoever for any war. And people say, well, we're fighting for the right cause. There is no right cause. Going out and murdering people is not a good thing to do. It's a bad thing to do.
But again, just for clarification, you're not opposed to you defending yourself. But when I say defending yourself, meaning the attack would have to happen on your land, your soil, then you defend yourself. I don't think you're opposed to that.
Well, it depends. If you walk into a biker bar and you tell him his girlfriend's ugly, and he actually, it's an attack that you created. I mean, here's what's funny, and if you go back to the Carter administration and Zbigniew Brzezinski saying that all we have to do to bankrupt the USSR is to supply the rebels in Afghanistan. That is precisely what the United States and NATO believed would be accomplished by Ukraine shelling Donbass. Okay, everybody forgets this because it's not part of the narrative. But after the coup d'etat in Ukraine in 2014, they attacked the Donbass region, and between 2014 and 2022, they murdered 14,000 people, mostly civilians, just because they were Russian heritage. And, to say that Putin invaded Russia or Putin invaded Ukraine and that started the war, that's bullshit. That's not what happened, okay? The United States invaded Ukraine in 2014, carrying bundles of $5 billion and $100 bills. We picked the illegal government, okay? And everybody wants to say, oh, yeah, well, that's not safe. Yeah, it is safe. We started that war.
And ladies and gentlemen, just please forgive the background noise. I'm in a hotel. I'm not at my office, and they're vacuum cleaning right now. All right. Can we go back to our journey from Afghanistan, and let's just get a couple more points here from the book that you'd like to share with us. Number one, can you address at least some of the psychological and social impacts that they endured?
I'm going to say I can't do that. I am incapable. There is nothing I have gone through in my entire life that compares in any way, shape, or form. And let me relay. Do you know why combat veterans never talk about it?
Because another person can't relate to it because it's only words to them.
It is that simple. Talking about combat is like trying to explain the color purple to a blind person. Okay, There's no frame of reference that both of you agree on. Okay, if I told even you who have been associated with the military things that I did, you would come to one or two, and perhaps two of two conclusions. Either Moriarty is some kind of murdering monster, or he's the biggest hero since Superman, and neither of which happens to be true. Okay, war is horrible. Okay, what both of them went through. Here's what I did. The wife wrote about 2/3 of the book, and she is a brilliant writer, and all of her emotions come through in the writing. I mean, you will cry when you read what she went through. The guy tends to be much more direct, factual, etc. He thinks like a guy, not like a woman. But he's talking about, he would be going to school and he would leave school in Kabul. And 5 minutes after he left school, a suicide bomber would set off a bomb and 45 kids would be killed. And of course, his parents and brothers and sisters were all terrified because they knew the school had been bombed, but didn't know where he was. There is nothing in my life that even compares to what they went through. This is one of the most moving books I have ever read. It's one of the most important books I have ever read. And if you can read it without crying, you're a lot tougher than I am.
Or you may not have a soul, because I can't even imagine seeing any child die. But then you said 45, and that's just not a one-off. That's a regular occurrence there.
Oh, it went on for years and years and years. It went on from 1975. Well, actually, it's still going. It went on from 1979. It's still going on today. If you're in the wrong tribe, okay, somebody will come into your village and they'll shoot all the men. And to say, well, Moriarty just made that up. Well, if you don't believe that, you can read about exactly the same thing happening in Syria. And you say, well, we don't like Muslims anyway. They're horrible to the Jews, so it's okay for Muslims to get killed. Well, they're killing Christians too, and they're killing Druze, okay? So it's everybody forgets this, but 10% of the people in Gaza were Christians, okay? But you will never hear the Christian Zionists say, gee, it's a really bad thing. They're killing Christians. They don't care.
That's a tough pill to swallow there. Before we close, what are some of the closing reflections that you would want someone to get, again, reading the book here? What are the key takeaways? And actually, no, I'll tell you what, let's step back for a moment. What should the international response be to refugees? And if I can interject my personal view on it, and this maybe you can help me here. I never understand why, if you're a refugee from Afghanistan, if you're a refugee from Syria, why is it you wouldn't consider going to Jordan, Yemen, Saudi Arabia? Why would you go to a geographical area that is nothing like your home region, where the culture is different, where the religion is different? I never quite understood that. Same with if I think of the immigration issue we're having in the United States. Why would someone not fleeing Colombia want to go to Uruguay or Argentina? Why are they coming to a different geographical, completely different culture, faith some ways, but political views? Can you answer that for us? And maybe that was a loaded question there, and maybe I stumbled around it, but I never could quite understand that.
Well, strange enough, it's a really good question. And it's a good question because there's a range of refugees. Now, if you take the refugees from Central and South America, by and large, with the exception of Venezuela, they are economic refugees. They are looking for a better life. If you take the refugees from Syria, from Lebanon, from Iraq, from Iran, from Afghanistan, from Pakistan, they are war refugees from Ukraine. Okay? They want to get as far away from the war as possible. Now, I'm going to say I'm against a lot of immigration. However, every single person in the United States was an immigrant at some point. And you can go back 15,000 years, and that was still true. Okay? Immigration is not a bad thing. Immigration is a good thing if you get people who are willing to change how they want to live. Okay? Somebody sent me something today, and both Poland and Italy have such a demographics issue that between now and the year let's see, the year 2100, Poland and Italy are going to lose about 25% of their population. There's a really serious problem in both Korea and in Japan right now because the demographics is not replacing the people. And something like some absurd number like 45% of the Japanese are over 60 years old. Okay, they've got this incredibly aging society, and they don't have people that can work who could support the tax structure that the government could take care of people. So immigration is not necessarily a bad thing. You just want the right immigrants. And I'll be blunt, if I was an immigrant, I would want to get as far away from the source of the problem. Okay, you talk about Colombians. Well, Colombians have revolution, Mexicans have revolutions, Venezuela has revolution. All of the Spanish led countries in Central and South America. The Spanish form of government was incredibly inefficient, and it centralized power in both the religion and in the oligarchs, and that's very dangerous. And we're in the same situation in the United States today. The oligarchs control the United States, and believe me, they don't give a shit about the average citizen. So we're not very far away from a revolution in the United States, and at some point in time, Americans may become refugees.
I'd hate to see that happen. And I referenced my wife being a refugee. I'm an immigrant. And so my wife...
Are you really? Where are you from?
I'm from Germany. So I was born a German citizen.
Beautiful. I'm going to tell you right now, you came over for economic opportunity. Am I correct?
No. So what occurred, this is somewhat unique. My parents were not married. So my mom was a German citizen. Dad was in the army. And the first thing most people say is, well, then you got dual citizenship. No, I didn't receive dual citizenship because they weren't married. And so I was born to a German citizen in a German hospital. Therefore, I was born a German citizen myself. And my mom, fast forward a couple of years, when I turned 6, my mom marries my stepdad, and we relocate to Oklahoma, and that's where I was raised, and that's when I received my dual citizenship. But what I wanted to share was that my wife and I share the same view in this regard, and you somewhat alluded to it. The concerns that we have is when someone comes here, especially if they're coming here illegally, they're not vetted. Yes, that's a huge concern. But the other part is that they don't assimilate. For instance, my wife and I, you'll never see on my car a sticker. You won't ever see me wear a T-shirt that says anything Germany. If there's a sticker on my car of any flag, it's going to be the American flag. And it burns both of us when we see someone that's proud of their national origin, but they're like, hey, you left that place. You came here. It just rubs us the wrong way. So for someone listening, there are immigrants that actually feel the same way that you do if you're a proud American, because I know that rubs a lot of people the wrong way when they see flags of another countries on their cars and the jerseys, the sports jerseys. I'm just about wearing the red, white, and blue. So just, I often don't share much about myself. That this is probably the most I ever have.
Well, strange enough, and you raised a really good point. Immigration is a giant problem in the EU because they have welcomed immigrants and refugees from both North Africa and from the Middle East and from the Far East with open arms. And many of the people, I'm going to say 80 or 90% of the people, have no intent to assimilate. They don't want to speak the language. They don't want to change the religion. They're going to have the same moral issues, okay, as it were, that they had in the country that they were in before. And literally, Europe has been invaded by hundreds of thousands of millions of people who have no intention of picking up the habits of the European. And I think it's dead wrong. Believe it or not, I think that Russia has the best attitude towards immigration, and their attitude is, do things our way and you're welcome. And if you don't do them our way, we're going to throw you out of the country. The United States bringing in somewhere between 12 and 20 million illegal immigrants. That was criminal. Okay,
Infrastructure can't support it. No, yeah, you're right.
yeah, it's and immigration's a problem. And what I'm trying to point out with the book is that there are certain areas like understanding what the Syrians are going through, what the Iraqis went through, what the Iranians went through, what the Pakistanis went through, what the Gaza went through, what the West Bank went through, what the Syrians are going through now. Uh, there's some terrible things happening in the world, and there are some people that we should absolutely try to help out. But the quid pro quo is that you try to assimilate. And I will say, this couple that wrote the book, Our Journey from Afghanistan, speak excellent English. They're both college educated. They're very nice people. They're learning Portuguese, and they have a skill set that will help Europe. And Europe, France doesn't have it, but Spain, Italy, a bunch of countries in Europe, the demographics are terrible. They're going to have immigration if they want to have an economy in the future. So immigration is not necessarily bad, but there should be limits on immigration.
And just a point you brought up here with the EU. So I spoke to my aunt in Germany. It's probably 10 years ago now, but I remember she shared the demographics, how it shifted because a lot of people from Turkey are coming there. And she shared they're gaming the system basically because they're allowed to have one family, if you will. But what happens is, and I can't remember exactly, but the male is allowed to, in his native culture, being Muslim, he's allowed to have 4 wives. So he comes here, he may claim one wife, but somehow the other wives come here as well, and then he's procreating. So he's procreating with 4 women, if you will, whereas the average German, of course, this it's one husband, one wife. And she shared how the culture is changing there in the southern part of Germany. That was 10 years ago, about the last time I spoke with her. But what you're sharing is actually happening and throughout the world. And again, it doesn't get highlighted in that regard. And she shared, no, they are not in any way attempting to assimilate. It is basically their attempt to get a stamp to say, hey, there's enough of us here, and now we want and demand the following from government. And of course, their ultimate goal she was sharing was they want Sharia law.
Strange enough, and there are people in the UK, Muslims in the UK, are saying this is an invasion and we're going to take over.
Yeah, so it's my heart goes out when someone's going through what Kasim and Zar are going through, but then I have to think long term. I'm speaking for I think all of our viewers. If we bring you in, do you assimilate? And if you don't assimilate, I have to worry about 20 years from now when there's more of you. Now you can say you were born here, and now we have to try to change our culture to accommodate you. And it shouldn't be. If the shoe was on the other foot, you wouldn't do it for us. And I think the West is more accommodating than you would say of those of the Muslim countries.
Well, nobody immigrates to Pakistan.
No. And why is that, by the way?
I've been to Pakistan. That's why.
And off a complete tangent, I never understood why. This is unrelated to anything we're talking about. It was just something I just thought about. Have you ever, I know right now you're not in the U.S., but did you ever notice while you were in the U.S., you would see Indian restaurants, but you never see a Pakistani restaurant?
Right, exactly.
I don't know. It's not to do anything with what you're saying. I just always wondered why you never see a Pakistani restaurant. But I digress. Now, in closing,
I know why. I've eaten Pakistani food.
Okay, so it's not similar. I love Indian food, by the way, but I used to enjoy chicken korma and some naan. Absolutely.
Similar. But your military background and your reason for coming to the United States, I never told you about why I got kicked out of the Marine Corps.
Oh, share it with us.
They found out my parents were married.
Your parents were married, and that's why they kicked you out the military. Expand on that for us.
I was in the Marine Corps. They found out I wasn't a bastard.
Oh. Well, you know what? Well, I fit the definition because I actually did not know my dad, my biological dad. So, yes, I am a bastard. And
You have been a big hit in the Marine Corps. They would have gone for you in a heartbeat.
all right. Well, you referenced the book. I'm going to leave in the description box for everyone where they can click on links to purchase a copy, and I'm assuming it's also going to be available on your website and Amazon, but the links will be there. If you would, Bob, share the title for us one more time.
Our Journey from Afghanistan. And it's written by a couple and details everything they went through. It is an exceptionally well-written, moving, important book, and it's something we need to think about because we're creating refugees with exactly the same problem today.
Now, before we close, do you have time for some questions from some viewers?
No.
Oh, all right.
Of course I do.
I know you do. I know you do.
Great.
I felt my leg getting pulled under my desk here. All right. You referenced gold, but one more time. The question here is, Bob, what is gold telling the markets? And if you don't own any gold, should I buy, the typo here, should they buy silver or platinum, or should they get some gold if they don't own any gold right now?
That's a really, really, really good question. And I have some friends who are going through the same thing. In Europe, you can buy gold tax-free, okay? And that's a big thing because tax is 20%. In the UK, you can buy gold coins with no tax, and you could sell them for no tax, which is even better. Obviously, I have been recommending gold and the purchase of gold since the website started in 2001. I believe everyone should be able to put their hands on some gold. Literally, I'll show you right here.
Oh,
okay.
I love it.
I got some gold coins that I can literally put my hands on. If you ignore the tax aspect, silver is the best thing to buy. Silver is absurdly cheap. Platinum is cheaper in relative terms, but it doesn't have the liquidity that silver has. Now, if you remember rhodium got down to about $600, and we were talking about that 10 years ago. But rhodium was so cheap that it was worth buying. Rhodium went from $600 to 28,000. Okay, I don't see platinum going from 1,000 to 20,000 or 25,000. Gold is being bought by central banks now, so gold is actually expensive. And even though I recommend people have some gold, you have to consider the tax aspect. But if you want an investment, you want to be buying silver now. When the public wakes up, and the public is totally clueless now, the gold ETFs are actually unloading gold. You would think they would be buying gold, and the opposite is true. The gold ETFs are actually unloading gold. That's in process of turning right now. And when the market explodes, and it's going to explode, platinum and silver will go up the most, but you're better off owning silver because of its liquidity.
Which leads to the next question. Why have we still not gone with, I'm assuming they're referring to the current administration, into Fort Knox? What happens if the gold is there, and what happens if the gold isn't there?
It's a really good question, and unfortunately, it's a little confusing. The gold can be there, and that's not the issue. The real issue is who actually owns the gold.
Yes, sir.
And believe me, I mean, one of the things that I'm one of the most cynical people that you have ever interviewed, and as cynical as I am, I just can't keep up. Some of the corruption that I've seen that has been displayed since the Trump administration took office. Do you remember who Stacey Adams is? She ran for governor in Georgia.
Yes, sir, Georgia.
She didn't win the election, but
no.
Black, and she ran for governor in Georgia, and she claimed she won, but she clearly didn't win. In the latter days of the Biden administration, a brand new ETF, not ETF, what's the term? I can't think of the term. I have brain freeze.
We'll call it a fund. How about that?
A brand new fund, okay, that she started was given $2 billion by the Biden administration. And that's just 100% pure corruption. I have never heard of corruption like that. The Democrats were not just corrupt, they were literally looting the treasury. Mm-hmm. And Trump has a real tough road to hoe because I'm not sure there is an economic solution. I think the United States is so bankrupt that there will be a default and a total change in our economic system. I don't think there's any way to bail the United States out. And it's because of $2 billion giveaways to somebody because they're a black Democrat.
So if the gold is there, hypothetically, if it didn't get hypothecated and rehypothecated, you think there is a chance? Meaning, when I say chance and they revalue the gold from $42 now to $3,000, and or through edict they assign it a new price, does that change it? Change the narrative there?
Yeah. Here's why. The debt of the United States is so large, and there are so many things. Much of the budget is set by law. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, it's set. Okay, you can't arbitrarily change it. And we're bankrupt whether the gold's there or not. And I think there are 261 million ounces in the gold reserves total. That's not just Fort Knox. That's Fort Knox, New York, and West Point. I think that's $7.5 trillion, but the debt of the United States is $37 trillion. I don't know. I frankly don't see any way out economically, and the situation is actually worse than I believed. And I've been saying for 20 years that we had a crash coming unlike any in history, and it is coming. It's here now. Gold is a thermometer, and gold is the same thing. If you walk into your bathroom and shove a thermometer in your mouth and you've got a 108-degree temperature, you know what you should do?
Well, you need to get into some cold. Well, your future prospects don't look too well, but medicine and get into some something. Nope. Okay, go for it.
You're gonna die.
Okay, well there you go. I said I was correct. Your future prospects don't look good.
Everything says, I mean, even Elon Musk, and I like some of what Elon Musk is doing. Elon Musk has said Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. And of course it's a Ponzi scheme. And the Democrats, and actually citizens as a whole, said, whatever you do, you can't do anything to our Ponzi scheme. So, if you're running a Ponzi scheme and nobody will let you change the scheme, what happens? The answer is you go bankrupt.
So based on his history, will Trump eventually fire Musk, or is this going to be a long-term relationship?
Well, long-term for Donald Trump, it's about 3 minutes.
Yeah. So you think it's going to last for the tenure of the 4 years or no? I don't see it.
Relationship for Donald Trump is 3 minutes.
All right, there we go. So the answer is no. I'm not too optimistic either. Now, switching to resource stocks, what are your thoughts on Line One Metals' new CEO, and are you still a believer in LIO?
Yes, and that's because of the deposit. It's an alkaline deposit. It's in a neighborhood of giant elephants. There is an identical deposit 40 kilometers away that has a resource of 11 million ounces, and I think has produced 8 million ounces. They stumbled trying to raise money, but they were trying to raise money in the worst market in 60 years. And while I regret the fact that it has declined so much, they've got an incredible deposit, and I have no problem whatsoever with them changing management. Changing management is an indication we're trying to improve things.
And bonanza grades. I mean, on a consistent basis, they have the highest grade results that I consistently see.
Well, actually, Newfound Gold has similar
Oh,
grades.
all right, fair enough. Well, but Line One metals, I'm a fervent believer in them as well. The next question is what looming pending macro event has you concerned the most that we may be overlooking?
It's got to be World War III. Okay, the big question is, where do we start it? We start it in Ukraine, or do we start it in Iran?
All right.
And that's not a macro. That's like world, universe class.
Yes. And what would you say the timeline on that would be?
3
5
minutes.
years? Okay, so it could happen any moment here. All right.
Yeah. And seriously, and understand, I was 16 years old during in 1962 in the Cuban Missile Crisis. And believe me, we knew how close we were to a nuclear war. The American public today is totally oblivious to it, and we are far closer today. I read something recently. The Russians are undergoing not nuclear weapon tests, nuclear planning exercises right now. Okay, the Russians are ready for World War III. And I'll tell you flat out, I don't give a shit who says otherwise. The United States is not ready for World War III, and we're the guys trying to instigate it, and we're going to lose.
Not a good proposition.
Not at all.
No, last question here for you. Out of all of your books, which one do you recommend for someone that wants to be the next Bob Morairty?
Well, it's a two-part question. Okay.
All right.
I wrote a fiction book about 20 years ago. It was designed to be read in 2 hours or less, and it's called Crapshoot. And it's about a young military aviation cadet going through flight training, falling in love, and ended up becoming a fighter pilot and going into combat, and it's awarded the Medal of Honor by President Nixon, and his girlfriend just happens to be a world-class poker player, and of course Nixon was a big poker player. If you want to understand my brain, you should download the book. It's electronic form only. If you want serious advice, you should read Nobody Knows Anything. I'm quite proud of that book. Books are like fine women and fine wine. They should improve with age. And I think that's a book that'll be read 50 years from now, if we're still around 50 years from now.
And I second that. Nobody knows anything. I was just in Charleston, South Carolina, and some people happened to approach me, and they said, "Hey, what's the best starting point for me?" And I said, "Look, there's one of two books, definitely." I referred, one is The Richest Man in Babylon, and I said, but 1A, 1B, Nobody Knows Anything. And I said, Bob Morairty, I mean, all of his books, I endorse them. I've benefited from them financially. I think if you're watching this, if you have had an opportunity to read it yourself, leave it in the comment section for someone else who hasn't, who's sitting on the sidelines contemplating. It is a must-have book, and I agree with you. For generations, you've blessed us with imparted wisdom that is priceless. It really is priceless. My only regret or my complaint with you is you didn't write it soon enough, because I was attending North Carolina State University. I got my business degree there. And what I thought I was going to learn there at North Carolina State University, you put in that book, and I never got it.
Hang on. You know what that says?
Well, it's a finger right now.
No.
Okay, what you got?
My give a shit needle. And if you'll notice, it's just barely bouncing off the peg.
Well, you should have wrote it sooner, sir. I graduated from North Carolina State back in 2001. I just wish you would have written it 20 years or 15 years earlier.
Do you know what that says?
That's the second one, right?
I give it shit age.
All right. Well, we've covered a lot of material today, sir. In closing, do you have any final questions or thoughts that you want to share with us, I should say?
Well, I'm a lot more talented than you think I am.
Oh, I know you're very talented. I've read your books.
We've talked about one book that I spent 5 weeks putting together. Have you ever interviewed Dave Cullum?
I have not, sir.
You should interview Dave Cullum. He comes out with the year in review every year. He publishes it in December on the ProvenAndProbable website. And my editor got in touch with me and said, "Hey, we've done his book a couple of times. I'll do the work if you'll spring for it." And I said, "Well, yeah, I love Dave Cullum's writing. I hate him as a person, okay, because he's so much better a writer than I am." But I published another book. While you're on Amazon, you should go to Dave Cullum 2024 year in review. And literally, the book came out last week. Dave Cullum puts together the most interesting information on the web, and little things like Stacey Adams and her $2 billion scam. He will have hundreds of examples like that. So I'm really proud of the book, our journey from Afghanistan. But I'm also very proud of the Dave Cullum book, which came out at exactly the right time. Both of them are just really interesting, important reading.
Well, Mr. Moriarty, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Wishing you the absolute best, sir.
Good deal. Thank you. It's always fun, Maurice.
Yes, sir.
The information presented on Proven and Probable is provided for educational and informational purposes only, without any express or implied warranty of any kind, including warranties of accuracy, completeness, or fitness for any particular purpose. The information is not intended to be and does not constitute financial, investment, or trading advice, or any other advice. You should not make any financial, investment, or trading decision based on any of the information presented without first undertaking independent due diligence and consultation with a professional broker or competent financial advisor.